off with a very interesting tangent that the Gemara went off on. What was relevant to our sugya is that the Mises Bezdin that are enforced and executed by Bezdin may not be done on Shabbos and may not be done on Yom Tov, because it says like Sevaru Eish B'chol Moishe V'Seichem, and Moishe V'Seichem includes even Bezdin. Even by Bezdin, they cannot violate the Shabbos to carry out a Mises Bezdin. And Rish Lakish said, if it wasn't for the fact that we had that pasuk, we would have had a kal v'chomer. We would have had a kal v'chomer to say, in fact, that you would do the Mises Bezdin on Shabbos. What would the kal v'chomer have been? Very simple. We know that avoda is doicha Shabbos. We bring the Tamidim, we bring the Musafin, we bring them on Shabbos and Yom Tov. So we know karbonis are doicha Shabbos. That's number one. We also know, so that means karbonis are more important than Shabbos. We also know that let's look back. I don't want to mess up the kal v'chomer. So Rish Lakish said we know that the we also know that kvuras meis mitzvah is doich avoda. So avoda is doich Shabbos, and kvuras meis mitzvah is doich avoda. So if kvuras meis mitzvah is doich avoda, and avoda is doich Shabbos, if kvuras meis mitzvah is doich avoda, and avoda is doich Shabbos, so kvuras meis mitzvah should be doiche Shabbos. That was Rish Lakish's kal v'chomer. 1 second. So Rabbi Yochanan said you don't have a raya because ritzicha toichiach, even though ritzicha is doiche avoda, it's not doiche Shabbos. So therefore you don't have a good kal v'chomer. That's how Rish Lakish, that's how Rabbi Yochanan responded to Rish Lakish's kal v'chomer. But then the Gemara asked, maybe Ritzicha should be doiche Shabbos from a kal v'chomer. Why? Madach avoda, that's doiche Shabbos. Ritzicha is doiche avoda, because we know it says ma'im mizbechi tikechenu lamos. You're going to take someone who's about to do a korban. If we need someone to do, we need a kohen to do a korban, you'll take him away. So Ritzicha is doicha avoda, and avoda is doicha Shabbos. So that means Ritzicha is stronger than avoda, and avoda is stronger than Shabbos. So surely Ritzicha should be stronger than Shabbos. Ritzicha should be doicha Shabbos. That was the kal v'chomer that the Gemara wanted to make, and the Gemara said that in fact that would be a good kal v'chomer. But the Torah tells us lo shivaru eish b'chol Moishe v'Seichem, which tells us that even though you have a kal v'chomer, that would indicate that Ritzicha should be doiche Shabbos. The Torah says it's not. So Zog to Gemara, Abaye said, once I have this, then let's make another kal v'chomer. Now that I know that Ritzicha is not doiche Shabbos, maybe Ritzicha shouldn't be doiche avoda either. Meaning, if you had a kohen that was doing avoda, Ritzicha, and he needed to be killed, he needed to be downed and killed, you would say that it's not doich avoda. How do I know that? From a kal v'chomer. Ma Shabbos shenitches mepnei ha'avoda. We know that avoda is stronger than Shabbos. Yet ein ritzicha doicha isa. Yet ritzicha is not doicha Shabbos. So if I have to create the order of strength, avoda is number 1, Shabbos is number 2, and ritzicha is number 3. So that means Ritzicha shouldn't be able to be doich avoda, because avoda is doich Shabbos, and Shabbos is doich Ritzicha. So for sure, avoda should be doich Ritzicha. So why do we take someone away from doing avoda to get killed from our kal v'chomer? Avoda should be doich Ritzicha. That was the kal v'chomer that Abaye made, which is a little bit of a problem because we know it says in the pasuk me'im is b'chenu tigachenu lamos. So Abaye, in order to and answer his kasha, he says, well, it depends. When it says ma'im is b'chenu, You should take him to get killed. What type of avoida were we talking about? Were we talking about the avoida of a carbon yochid, or were we talking about the avoida of a carbon tzibur? Zokta Abaye, maybe that pasuk is talking about the avoid of a carbon yochid. So if the coin is needed to do the avoid of a carbon yochid, that we take him away. You know why? Because the avoid of a carbon yochid isn't so strong. Because the avoid of a carbon yochid is not doicha Shabbos. We know you can't bring a personal carbon on Shabbos. The only carbonos that are brought on Shabbos are carbonos tzibur. So therefore, Zokta Abaye, we have a very good compromise. When it says that's referring to a carbon yochid, because the avoida of a carbon yochid is not doicha ritzicha. Ritzicha is doichet. But the avoida of a carbon tzibur, which we know is doicha Shabbos, that avoida will also be doicha mimizbechenu. So if there's a coin, it's in the middle of doing avoida, or we need him to do the avoida. An avoida of a carbon tzibur, and he's chayv misa. The avoida is doicha the mitzvah of the chi of misa. That's the conclusion of Abaye. Zokt Rava, that won't be a good teretz, because Abaye brought us kavachomer about avoida being doicha Shabbos. But let's look at avoida being doicha Yom Tov. According to the shita that holds, going on to Lamed Vav Amar Aleph, that avoida is doicha Yom Tov, that avoida of a carbon yochid is doicha Yom Tov. Because the shita that holds that you can bring private karbanos on Yom Tov. You come to be the regal for Sukkos, for Pesach, for Shavuos. If you have private karbanos, you can bring them on Yom Tov. So according to that shita, even the avoid of a carbon yochid is doicha Yom Tov. So then I can make the same kavachomer for a carbon yochid. Madich avoid even of a carbon yochid is doicha Yom Tov. Yet Yom Tov is still doicha ritzicha, because you don't do ritzicha on Yom Tov. Bezdin doesn't kill people on Yom Tov. Once again, because it says Moishe Vaysom, Bezdin doesn't carry out Mises Bezdin sentences on Yom Tov. So surely avoida sai of a carbon tzibur, sai of a carbon yochid should be doicha ritzicha, and Abaye's compromise doesn't work because we now have a kavachomer that would indicate that even a carbon yochid should be doicha ritzicha. That was the Rava's kasha. Zokt Rava, it says ma'im mizbechi tikachenu lamos. If it says ma'im tikachenu lamos, if you're going to say that it doesn't apply not to a carbon yochid, not to a carbon tzibur, what's the pasuk going to mean? So therefore, it must be that you don't follow the kavachomer. If you have a mefurish pasuk of ma'im mizbechi tikachenu lamos to tell you that the ritzicha is doicha the avoida, so that's a mefurish pasuk neged the kavachomer. But Zog to Gemara, even according to Abaye, who holds you can split it, and you might want to argue that the Mizbechi is only referring to a carbon yochid, that doesn't make sense. Because Me'im Mizbechi, my Mizbech, it doesn't say Me'im HaMizbech Tikachanu Lamas, it says My Mizbech, my Mizbech. What does my Mizbech mean? Zog to Gemara, it means the carbon tobit. It's karbani, lachmi, li'ishai, reach nichaychi, tikr vuli. You see the possessiveness of the carbon tamid is the carbon that the Torah is talking about when the Torah said ma'im mizbechi tikachenu lamas, which is referring to a carbon tzibur. So you see kalor that even a carbon tzibur you disrupt in order to take a koyin to kill him if he's chayav misa. So the maskana of the Gemara is that saya carbon tzibur, saya carbon yochid. If a coin is needed to do them, we will still remove him and disrupt the avoida. Sa'av a carbon tibur, sa'av a carbon yochid, in order to be mekayim achiv misa on him, because it says mizbechi tikachenu lo. Beautiful. That was the end of yesterday's sugya. Today we'll start a new sugya on Daf Lamed Vav Amar Aleph, about 12 lines down from the top. Dine Mamanis, Tameus for Taharis. The Mishnah says that Dine Mamanis and Tuman Tahara, when the Mishnah is listing off the many different differences between Dine Mamanis and Dine Nefashis, the Mishnah says that Maschilim in Agador, meaning that you start, whose opinion do we listen to first when we're deliberating? We listen to the opinion of the greatest there. But by Dine Nefashis, we have to start from the smallest guy, because we're afraid if the oldest, most choshev adayin speaks first, he might condemn, and then nobody's going to want to argue on it. But by Dini Mamadus and Tumat Tahira, we're not concerned. Yes. No, the pasuk is going to. The Gemara is going to bring a pasuk. It says Lasan al Riv. The pasuk says you're not allowed to argue on the greater Rav. It says Lasan al Riv. There's no yud there. The ksiv is without yud. Lasan al Rav. That's right. So if the Rav says wear masks, you're not allowed to argue. Adam Gadol says you have to wear masks, you're not allowed to argue. So Zok the Gemara Amar Rav. Rav said, "Ano havoi b'minyana devei Rebbe." I was once at a din Torah where Rebbe was in charge, and Rashi says the din Torah that they were discussing was a case where if goyim come and put a gun to someone's head and says, "We are going to take your property. We're seizing your property," and then they take this property and they sell it at a discount to another yid. Is this yid allowed to keep that property because it was seized from his friend other yid? So the Maskana of the Gemara was that, which is what they voted on, was that the person who bought it from the guy gets to keep it, but we make him pay the discounted price, the difference between the discounted price and the full price to the original owner. So let's say this property is worth $100,000, but this is like stolen goods. So when the guy stole it, they sold it for $70,000. So you save $30,000. It's not $30,000 that you'd have to give to the original owner. So Rav said, "Didi uminoi didi have a mitzvah liberation." They started from me, even though our Mishnah says you're supposed to start from the Gadol. V'anan maschilim in Gadol tnam. So why in Rebbe's Bezdin did they start from little old me, Rav? They should have started from Rebbe. Amar Rabba Bereidur Ava v'temer Apil Bereidur Valim Shiny Min Yama Devei Rebbe. There's a difference when we're talking about Rebbe's Bezdin. The Kulum in Yunayu min Atzad have a mischali. Because by Rebbe, he was such an onav, he never spoke first. They always started from the smallest. You know why? Because Rebbe said, "I'm no greater than you." He's a very big onav. From the days of Moishe until the days of Rebbe, we never found that someone should be at the top of Klal Yisrael and Torah and the top of Klal Yisrael and Gedulah. We never found it between Moishe and Rebbe. Moishe was the greatest in Malchus, and Rebbe was the greatest in the Siyas, but he was the biggest and the best in Torah and Gedulah. Zok to Gemara, Velohi, is that true? V'havi Yeshua. Yeshua was the greatest in Torah, and he was the Melech. Zok to Gemara, Hava Elazar. Elazar was just as great as Yeshua in Torah in Yeshua's times. V'hava Pinchas. I Lamaisa Pinchas after Yeshua and Elazar. Pinchas had everything. Zok to Gemara, Hava Zekanim. And Rashi says the Zekanim refers to Osniel and Avtzan and Boyaz. But Lamaisa Shmuel died. There was a time where Shaul was ruling without Shmuel. I mean all of his life. And Shaul, part of his life, Shmuel was there. And Rashi brings down that David he put himself under Ira Yiri. He died, David was still alive. David's whole life, he wasn't the Torah Gedulah B'Makom Echad.
One second. I thought David HaMelech, not Reb David Hofstadter, right?
That's right.
Could you argue that that's Torah Gedulah B'Makom Echad? I would.
Yeah, but that's not that's later on. You're going to soon see later on there were different things. Nowadays it could be different. We have a Shleima, we have a Shimi Ben Gera. Katley, Lamaisa Shimi Ben Gera was killed. I mean, the whole period that he was in Matzav Gedulah, nobody was like. I have a Chizkiah. So we have a Shavna. If you remember, we had the story where Shavna had 130,000 people in the Shir versus only 110,000 in Chizkiah's Shir, and Shavna ended up wanting to deal with Sanhedrin, and he ended up getting tortured to death by Sanhedrin. Fregno Ikli was killed. Tomorrow, Kulish Nei Karmina. Lamaisa, part of Chizkiah's life, there was Shavna there. I will have a Esra. So tomorrow, have a Nechemeh ben Chakalia. So I'll also say in more our contemporary times, Moishe Rebbe Ashi lo yimatzidu Torah Gedulah B'Makom Echad. V'loi v'ahav Huna bar Noson. Huna bar Noson make of a kaif the Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi was the king. Frakt Akiva I v'haver Rab David Hofstadter. If the Gemara and the Chanami nowadays is different. Zok Gemara. Din in the Foshus. Maschilim in Atzad. You don't ask the greatest dayan first. How do we know this? Amar Rav Acha, Bar Papa, Amar Kra, Lo Yisadna al Riv, and we read it Lo Yisadna al Rav, meaning you're not allowed to argue, not appropriate to argue, to express a dissenting opinion, keneged the great. Rabba Bar Bachana Amar Rebbe Yoichan Mehacha. The Yomer David al Nosh, when David had to kill Novel because he held he was married to Malchus, he told him Chigir Esh Es Charboy, V'Yachir Ish Es Charboy, meaning Tuzach Harayin the Sugya. V'Yachir Gam David Es Charboy, and only then did David put on the schar, meaning he looked for their opinion first. So you see by a case of Dine Nefashos, that you don't start from the greatest. And there's a whole discussion here. This is not Bezin, this is Moed B'Malchus. So Moed B'Malchus, you don't even need a Bezin. So Tosfos has a whole discussion about it.
Okay, so Yosy, so we touched upon this 2 days ago about the process. And I've had this issue in general when there's let's say, something going on in the city and they want to go to all the Rabbanim. So they go to all the Rabbanim and then they go to Reb Shlomo. What is the difference? Why don't you just go to Reb Shlomo first? Because if all the Rabbanim don't agree with Reb Shlomo is going to overrule it. And if they do agree, I don't need all the other Rabbanim. I can just get it from Reb Shlomo directly. In other words, the guy who you ask first, you tell me start with the lowest dayan, if you will. You think it matters? You're going to start the guy at the edge of the dais first. He's going to be intimidated to say anything. And then if he's the guy who ultimately went against the big dayan, he's going to stand out. Oh, he did. What, the guy didn't know what he was talking about.
So what you're referring to is not a bezdin. Talking about in general asking opinions. So the only reason why these balabatim went to Reb Shlomo at the end, after they went to all the other rabbanim, is because they didn't hear what they wanted to hear. Had they heard from one of the earlier rabbanim what they wanted to hear, they would have never risked going to Reb Shlomo to overrule. They only went to him in the first place because they didn't like what they were hearing until now. Unless there are those who have the liberty of always going to Reb Shlomo because they will actually quote in Reb Shlomo's name whatever they want to say anyway, irrelevant what Reb Shlomo actually said. So those people go straight to Reb Shlomo.
Okay, but you're telling me that in a deliberation, in a jury room, it's going to be different? Who's going to want to speak? If Reb Shlomo is in the room,
But if Reb Shlomo is last, no. If nobody's going to want to speak. No one's going to want to speak. We actually had this in the Gemara.
Right.
People don't want to speak when the God was there, but they're forced to speak. You have to speak.
In other words, make a decision regardless, and you take your chances.
You have to say your opinion. Yes, you might end up expressing an opinion that's not like Reb Shlomo's, but we want that. And as a matter of fact, you asked a very good question. You said the moment Reb Shlomo says it, I'm going to change my mind. That's why the Gemara says, if you were mezakeh, we don't let you change your mind until the very last second by the vote. But during the entire deliberations, even though Reb Shlomo said against you, you're going to have to try to come up with ideas to justify why you say zakai. So your kasha just clicked in my mind. Why is it that someone who originally thought zakai can't change his mind till the very end? The teretz is because the moment he sees someone greater than him taking a different opinion, he's going to right away want to defer to that. And we want to bring out the opinion that says zakai.
Right. Or I don't, let's give them credit. He's not going to necessarily want to change it, but he'll doubt. He won't feel as confident with, it's what Shlomi Feintel says, whether you're right or wrong, I'm sure. In other words, he won't feel as confident.
Right. But I want to tell you something else. Let me ask you a question. Shoichet corrupts. How does shoichet corrupt? If a judge says shoichet, does that mean what he's going to do is, even though I know this guy who gave me shoichet was wrong, but he gave me shoichet, I have to do this for him? Is that how shoichet works? I don't think so, because that's not what the Torah says. The Torah says shoichet ya'aver. When a judge takes shoichet, he's not going to be corrupt and paskin wrong, even though he knows the other guy's right. His brain is going to actually justify why the guy who gave him shoichet will be right. That's why he blinds the eye. If he knows that he's doing wrong, but he's doing it because he's pressured because he's getting money, he's not blinded. He's not a corrupt chakran. But shoichet ya'aver, it subconsciously will make him think differently. So it's the same thing. If you're in a bezdin and you have one opinion, and then the greatest dayan says against you, I think it'll work like shoichet. You're not going to just change your
Yes.
mind because he said that.
Yes.
You're going to actually change your mind because you're going to actually
Yes.
think.
Yeah. How can I align my opinion with his?
Exactly. And that's a form of shoichat.
Right. Okay.
That's why I love shoichat so much, because where shoichat is, there are places where it's a mitzvah to use shoichat.
Right.
And I'll bring you a raya that there are places where it's a mitzvah to use shoichat. Because the Rebbe Shalom wouldn't have created that mitzvah that shoichat blinds unless sometimes it's needed. Right?
Correct.
Everything
Well,
the Rebbe Shalom creates, the only creates for the good. So where's shoichat good? There's a mitzvah to use shoichat in business.
so that's why I'm enamored with politicians, because you can persuade him to say whatever you want. He's open. I'm open for second. Fill my boot.
That's right.
Persuade me. I'm ready. A lawyer, right?
That's right.
A lawyer will say whatever you want him to say.
That's right. That's right.
I hope Dave Kuttner's listening. Okay.
Zog to Gemara weiter. Omer Rav. Shoyna Adam litalmidoi and v'don imoi b'din nefashos. What if someone is a Talmud? He's allowed to explain to him things and teach him things, yet when they both are on the same bezdin, it counts as two opinions. You might think, hey, since he's a Talmud, he's going to mirror everything I say, so that's only one opinion. No, his Talmud is considered to have an independent opinion. We have a brayso that says not like that. Which is like asking the Rebbe, Yeridei Shaila. You don't need a bezdin for that. For such a Shaila, even a Avu B'noi is mutter, even a Rav Talmido is mutter. And the Rishonim say, what do I need two people? Even one person alone is enough. Just asking a Shaila. But what if there was a discussion about it, and we decided to take a vote, on Avu B'noi, Rav Talmido, Moinim Shnayim. But if it's Dinei Mominis, and Dinei Nefashis, and Dinei Makos, and Dinei Kiddush HaChodesh, and Dinei Ibur Hashana, Avu B'noi, Rav Talmido, Ein Moinim Lo Ela Echad. So you have a Meforshah Stira. These brayso we just quoted list up a whole bunch of things, including Dinei Nefashos. That a Rav in his Talmud is only considered one opinion. Rav said it's considered two opinions. Zok Gemara, it depends what type of Rav Talmidai. Ki for Amar Rav. When did Rav say that a Rav and his Talmud is considered two separate opinions? Is Kagoin Rav Kahana v'Rabasi. Those two Talmidim of Rav, they didn't need Rav to spoon feed them. It was just a ligmari. He should quote to them from his Rebbes to give them the information. But once they had information, they themselves can analyze that information and formulate their own opinion. There are much more senior type of Talmud, a gifted type of Talmud. That's where Rav said that they have their own opinion. The Lagamri de Rav have a trichi, u'lesvari de Rav loy have a trichi. They just needed the information, but they didn't need the svaris of Rav, and therefore they're considered independent opinions. The brayso that says they're not independent opinions is if they also need their Rebbe to explain to them all the svaris, then their opinion is not considered a second independent. Amar Bavo, Asar Dvarim Yesh Ben Dina Mamnis Ladina Nefashos. Our Mishnah, if you count them, there's supposed to be 10 differences between Dina Mamnis and Dina Nefashos. Right? We had a list of several of them. I don't remember all of them, but we had that the Dayan can't change his mind if he's Edel Tzchos, and we had that only a Dayan could say a Svar L'chayva, not anybody from the peanut gallery, but by Mominus they could say. We had what type of dayanim, how many dayanim. We had, but by Dina Mominus you could pass on the same day. By Dina Nefashos you have to go to the next day. But there's a whole bunch of differences. V'chulam einoi hagin b'shar nisko. Now shar nisko we know is compared to Dina Nefashos. That's why you need a best of 23. Zok to Gemara here. All those 10 chalukim listed in the Mishnah don't apply to Shar Niskol. We treat our Shar Niskol like Dinei Mominus. The only thing in which we treat a Shar Niskol like Dinei Nefashos is Chutz Me'esrim Mushloish. The rule that they need Esrim V'Shloish Dayanim, that's what we compare the Shar Niskol to a human, but all the other halachas that the Mishnah lists doesn't apply to Shar Niskol. How do we know this? The pasuk says, "Lo yisata mishpat ev yoincha beriva." You shouldn't ever be mata the mishpat of a poor person. Rather, you have to paskin justly. And Zokt Rashi, Loisata l'ra al pi echad, avol atamata l'choiva din hashar al pi echad. Dafka human, mishpat of yoinchi atamata, avol atamata mishpat shal shar haniska. So it says in Rashi, avol atamata l'choiva din hashar al pi echad, even with 1/8. Here we learn, just like the Mila, that by a human, a roiv of 1 will not be able to condemn, so we don't apply that to a shar nisko, a shar nisko. Even a roiv of 1, a majority of 1 dying, will be enough to condemn. And just like this rule does not apply to a shar nisko, so to all the other stringencies of dinin nefashis do not apply to a shar nisko. Umistaver the hekish lahachi asi. It's much that the hekish is for that. To ikar hadin utchilasai. That's the main din. Avol kunu inach latzala asu. All the other them are coming latzala. Umalonu lochas al sharmut. All of these, the reason why you need 23, that's what the hekish is for, to compare a shar nisko to din nefashis, because that's how you start the din. But all the other things, all other stringencies of din nefashis, is because we're trying whatever way possible to find leniency for the person who we're going to kill, the person who's charged. A shar nisko, we don't have that mercy for him. As Rashi says, "Umalonu lochus al shar amuit." Fakert mutav l'kayim bo uvi artara. This is a wild animal. It's better that we kill it. So we're not looking for leniencies. But to the hekesh that compares shar nisko to din nefashis only applies to the fact that you need 23 dayon. Aval atamata mishba shel shar nisko. Frek gemar asara. You're telling me there's 10? Count them. How tes habu? There's only 9. Zok to Gemara, har asara katani. What do you think there's 9? If you count them, you'll find that there are 10. Zok to Gemara, because 2 of the chumras of din and nefashis really stem from the same reason, and we really consider those 2 one. Mishum the eina koyok sherin, the halacha that a mamzer and a ger cannot pass din and nefashis, yet he could pass din and mominus, and the halacha of esrim v'shloisha. And the halacha that din and nefashis requires a bezin of 23 versus din and mominus only needs 3. Chadohi. They both stem from the same halacha, and therefore we only consider them one difference. Why is it chadohi? Because the my time of mamzer posel medina nefashis. Why is a mamzer posel from din and nefashis? Mishum do beinin chav gimel. That is Sanhedrin. You need 23. It should be like a Sanhedrin, like a tzibur, as we learned. And by Sanhedrin we learned with nasu itcha b'doimen lach miyuchasim kamaisa. So the same svara that we treat this with a Sanhedrin, even though it's a small Sanhedrin, but you need a Sanhedrin of 23 in order to be able to condemn someone to death. Once you need a Sanhedrin, another feature of a Sanhedrin is that a mamzer and a ger won't be able to be eligible. Zog to Gemara, ha'ika achriti, but there is still, we have another one. We have an additional one. So even though we're only counting the 10 in the Mishnah as 9, there's actually a 10th. The Tanya, ein moishivin b'Sanhedrin, zaken, usiris, umishain leibanim. A zaken, usiris, umishain leibanim, who doesn't understand the pressures of someone raising a family and the expenses involved, he shouldn't be paskening on someone's life. Even someone who's naturally a merciless fellow, he would not be able to paskin on someone's life and death question. But v'chilu fein b'mesis, by a mesis, all of these people who are difficult, they would be able to paskin to condemn a mesis. We want to be brutal with the mesis, and therefore we're definitely not going to offer him these type of considerations. Who are we meaning to add to the list of people who are kosher dayanim for dinim omnis? Amar b'yudot la'asuye mamzer. Even a mamzer can pass dinim omnis. We have another Mishnah that already told us that a mamzer is kosher. It says kol royu lodin dinim nefashos, royu lodin dinim omnis. V'yesh royu lodin dinim omnis, v'ein royu lodin dinim nefashos. So the Gemara wanted to know, what is the difference? What do we mean to say that there are those who could don dine mominus but not dine nefashos. Who's that? The Amar Gedulah say mamzer. So we already have a Mishnah that says a mamzer can don dine mominus. Why do you need our Mishnah to say akol ksher and lod dine mominus? Zok Gemara, we have two Mishnayos here. Chada lasuya ger v'chada lasuya mamzer. One Mishnah is adding a ger can paskin dine mominus, and the other Mishnah is adding a mamzer that can paskin dine mominus. Utricha, you need a separate Mishnah for each of them. You would not know one from the other. Yes, meaning ger, it's the roy lovi bakal. You know why a ger can paskin dine mominus? Because a ger is roy to he can marry a Jewish woman. Aval mamzer who cannot marry a Jewish woman, emaloi cannot be a dayan. That's why the Mishnah said akoy lasuya mamzer. V'yesh meaning mamzer. If we only knew that the mamzer could be a dayan. The Vami Tipashera, Lamaisa, the Mamzer, his initial creation was a Tipuk Shera. Avoger, the Leibami Tipuk Shera, but the Ger that comes from a Goyish Tipa, not as Eri Yisrael, Emaloi, Tricha, that's why you need two Mishnayos, one to tell you that a Mamzer can dan dine mominus, and one that a Ger can dan dine mominus. Ve'ena kol ksherin lod and dine nefashis, my time. What is the reason? The Tanya Rebbe Yosef, Kishem shebezin menukin b'tzedek, just like they have to be crystal clear and squeaky clean in their righteousness. Kach menukin mikol mum. They also have to be clean from every blemish and rashes a mum mishpacha. Doesn't mean a physical mum. It means they have to have a crystal clear, squeaky clean yichus. Omar Meimer Maikra. Where do you see that from the pasuk? So it's a pasuk in Shir Shirim. In Shir Shirim, the Rebbe is talking about Knesset Yisrael. Kulach yafa re'isi. My flock are beautiful. Mum ein bach, and there's no mum in you. Frankly, more from this pasuk, how do you know it means a mum in yichus? Maybe it means a physical mum. V'dilma mum mamish. Amar Bacha B'Yaakov, Amar Kra. It says by Moishe Rabbeinu, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him to pick the Shivim Zakenim, the Torah says V'siyatzu sham imcha. They should stand with you. What do you mean they stand with you? Imcha b'doimin lach. They have to be similar to you, meaning they have to pure yichus. Maybe only there by the Shivim Zakenim, since HaKadosh Baruch Hu was going to be Mashra his Shechina on these 70, which is a lot more than the regular Smicha. Maybe that's why they have to be doimin lach. They have to be pure in their yichus, like Moishe Rabbeinu. But who said for every Sanhedrin, for anyone to paskin, Dinei nefashos, he has to have such pure yichus. This is by Yisroi. When Yisroi was telling Moishe to set up the Batei Dinim, he said, "V'nosu itcha, they're going to carry it with you." There was no Ashrosh Hashchini yet. That was still in the Midbar, and they were setting up courts. That was not a special Ashrosh Hashchini, and still they had to be b'doimin loch lahava. They had to be squeaky clean, beautiful yichus, just like you. Zok Heilige Mishnah weiter. Sanhedrin hoisa kechatzi ger nagula. They sit in a half a circle. Kedei sheyehu royin zeh. If they just sat in a straight line, all of the Yodim can't see each other's faces. And when each dayan is explaining his position, it's not enough to hear what he has to say. You have to see him speaking, because that has a big impact in understanding somebody. So listening to an audio tape doesn't come close to watching a videotape. And the Yonim have to have understanding of each other with clarity. So why can they be in a full circle? The reason why they cannot be in a full circle, because the Baladin in the middle at any given time are going to have their backs to the Yonim. So the Yonim won't be able to see the Baladin. So a half a circle is a perfect configuration. We learned this. We had this part of the Mishnah quoted earlier, that there would be two stenographers, the Kaiser and Divrei Mezak and Divrei Mechayv. I'm changing the gears based on the Tzionim. Rabbi Yudaimer Shloisha, there was actually three stenographers, Echad Kaiser Divrei Mezakin, the Echad Kaiser Divrei Mechayvin, the Shlishi Kaiser Divrei Mezakin, the Divrei Mechayvin, and that's just to make sure that they got all the arguments right. So we wanted one person only focusing on the Mechayvin, so he doesn't have to write so much. He can make sure to get every detail of the conversation. Same thing with the Mezakin. And then you also wanted a third guy who did both, so you have a second opinion on each of the two testimonies, so that if there's something that's not clear, we can compare the two transcripts. Zog to Gemara weiter, Zog to Mishnah weiter, on Amar Aleph. In front of these Dayanim, there were 3 rows that they had 48 people split into 3 rows. And everybody in that row, it wasn't random who sat where. Every seat was very specifically assigned based on the gadlus of all of these Talmidim. Therefore, kol echad ve'echad makeres mekayimai. Everyone knew where he belonged. Everybody sat in a very specific place. So the top guys were in the first row, but even in the first row, the top guy was in the middle, and the weaker guys were around him. And there was literally positions 1 through 12, or it's more than that. It's 48, so it's like more than that. And then came the second row, the third row. What if for some reason one of the Yodim had to leave and he couldn't continue? So they needed now to promote one of the Talmidim to be a dayan. So they only took the top Talmud in the number 1 position that was in the first row. And now they wouldn't just, so now they have one guy missing from the 48, so they don't just bring some guy from the Bishmedrash and put him in the missing seat. No, everybody shifts their position up 1. The person from the second row would move into the first row, but in the lowest seat. So everybody would move up, and then someone from the second row would move into the first row, and again in the second row everyone moves up, and someone from the third row goes into the second row, and on the third row everyone moves up, and then they bring somebody from the shuk, a Talmid Chacham, to come and join. Then they got someone else to add to the whole mix, and they put him in the third position. Even within each row, you didn't just sit in the empty seat that was vacated. Everybody moved up 1, and the person in the back got the very last seat, because he's the last guy to join. So basically, it's first in, first out, and everybody goes in that seder. Okay, we'll stop here, and Bez Hashem, we will continue tomorrow.
So everybody gets to be number 1 eventually, Yosy?
Yes. Everybody gets to be number 1 eventually. Unlike our vice president.
Very good. Okay.
Okay.